Good morning, and to not sing, I think it is. Is that right? I pronounced that correctly? So I have two roles here this morning. I am work at Griffith University, but I'm also the Vice President, the incoming President of the Australasian Council of Open Distance and E-Learning, ACODE, which Blackboard have been very generous in sponsoring over the years and a number of events that we've held. This image is of a prize-winning 3D printed dress that was developed by one of our design students at Griffith University. It's a great example of some of the work our creative industry students are doing with the 3D printing realm, in the 3D printing realm. I'm talking through a number of issues in relation to the emerging trends we're seeing within higher education, both in the Australasian sector, but also globally as well, and how the notion of partnering with key bodies within the greater higher education system is so important if we're going to be able to sustain our way forward over the next few years. In many industries, this is known as disruption, but it's how we embrace disruption that is so important to us as a higher education sector. And it's the way we not only embrace, but also lead change within this disruptive nature. And I'll talk through some of the notions of disruption within the higher education sector as we see it at the moment. So what we do see is disruption is not limited to the taxi industry with the Ubers coming in, or the food delivery industry, or the provision of movies through Netflix and bodies like that. So these new companies have disrupted the way we'd traditionally consumed provision of goods and services. And so similarly, new models of educational delivery have started to emerge over the recent years, and mostly generated by the use of technology and technology-enhanced learning. And this has driven new models of delivery. And these new business models have been also coupled with the slowness of the national regulators to actually come to terms with what's happening. So it's only in recent times. So I've been working in higher education for almost 30 years now. And the university I was working with at the time when we started e-learning was the first university in the world to graduate an online student, a student who had fully participated in their course online, and we did an online graduation. It was the first in the world. That was 19 years ago. 20 years ago that we graduated that student. And it's only now that the national regulators are coming to terms with what it means for students to study fully online and to provide the regulations that will help institutions provide an equivalent structure for the students who are fully online or who are studying in a face-to-face environment. Those institutions that are moving well into this space are not afraid to mix those metaphors of what is online learning, what is face-to-face learning through blended modes, through flipped classrooms and things like that. And it's those institutions that are starting to make an impact with the partnerships they are making with other bodies within the sector. One of the interesting things is most universities are now, who are going with this trend, are realising they can't do it by themselves, that they have come from a traditional base of research and scholarship, but have not necessarily been experts in the notion of online learning and the development of systems to develop that online learning up in. And so many years ago, the institution I was involved in had their own homegrown learning management system, and we were playing with this system, and we went through a couple of iterations of early adoption of, I think I first started teaching in Blackboard 4, so that's quite a while ago. And then we moved to WebCT, and then we moved to Moodle, and been involved in a number of different systems over the years. But in all that, we haven't been able to necessarily do it really well by ourselves, and we've had to partner with a number of different companies to do that. We're also seeing that there's a number of educational communities or strategic partnerships that are being made within the higher education sector, both within the private providers and with the government universities. Those who will come alongside institutions in the business of education to provide opportunities for these institutions to go up to the next level. And so, for example, I'll give you just the example of where we are at Griffith University. I should say we are a university of 50,000 students in Brisbane in Australia, and have a full range of from medicine through to the visual arts and everything in between, business, commerce, all those type of subjects. So a comprehensive university, you would call it. And so we have decided, we are partners with a number of other institutions similar to us around the country, and they're called the Innovative Research Universities. So Griffith is a part of a cluster. You'll be hearing from a person later on who's part of what we call the GO8 group of universities. So we have clusters of universities within Australia. We also partner with government through our research centres, very strong in the notion of students as partners. So we're not just doing things to students, we actually want to embrace the opportunities that students bring with them in relation to their studies. That's not saying students know better than what the university does, but there is a wealth of understanding or a pool of human capital that needs to be embraced by the universities with the students who are now coming through. We see that as a major trend, a major shift. We also see that there's a real need to partner with industry. And so where Griffith is moving towards is what we call dual badging of our degrees and our micro-credentials and things like that. So how Griffith might have a dual credential with KPMG or one of the other big accounting firms and things like that. We also partner with vendors, and in Griffith's case we have a number of strategic partnerships. One is with Blackboard, with Cisco and Microsoft, all of which make up a suite of partnerships that we hope will take us to a strong point in the future. We also partner with different consortiums of, within the Australasian sector. So OUA is the Open Universities of Australia, and Griffith was a founding member of that consortium of universities that offer fully online courses. There is Navitas, FutureLearn, Pearson's we've all partnered with over the years to deliver certain elements of our programs, elements that we didn't feel confident enough to do ourselves in that fully online space. Importantly though, we also need to benchmark our practice, both in a formal way and a semi-formal way. And that's what our regulators, our government regulators, are requiring us to do. They recently brought out what they call guidance notes in relation to how we fulfil our standards. And one of those guidance notes suggested you must be benchmarking, doing comparative analysis with what other institutions are doing to ensure that you are on the right track, particularly in relation to the online learning. But we've got all these new ways of doing things, but we don't necessarily want to throw out all the old ways of doing things. We don't want to throw out that baby with the bathwater. And so all the shiny lights of technology does not mean that we can just move fully into that online space without strategically working through what that means and how our students might be responding to this environment. Most of our students, vast majority of our students work as well as study. They would work a minimum of 25 hours a week in different workplaces and doing full-time study. So there's a number of different arrangements that need to be made to accommodate that type of learning. When I went to university, back last century, a long time ago, I didn't have to work at university. My education was free, and I didn't have to work, but it's no longer free. So what we are suggesting, Griffith at least, is there's a pedagogy first, not a technology first approach to learning. And that's what we need our partner institution, our partner vendors to be on that same page as us as we move forward. So it's not just about transmitting information, but it's the notion of how we engage students through things like collaborative learning, engaged learning, and things like that. And so we partner with our students to understand the needs they have so they can be successful as they move forward. I'll return to this in a few minutes. But because of this, we're now starting to see new trends emerge. So we're seeing learning and teaching initiatives based on emerging technology, not based on common practices or normal face-to-face practices. There are new practices that are emerging, and we're continually, increasingly looking to mainstream. So when I started teaching in Blackboard 4 all those years ago, I was using discussion forums and I was putting up PDF documents and things like that. And that was the best of online learning at the time. We're using things like Wimber and tools like that back in the day. There's also, of course, as I mentioned, this notion there's a far greater emphasis on the quality of that practice, particularly driven by our regulators, and how we can be assured that what we are offering our face-to-face students is of a similar or equivalent quality with what we're offering our online and face-to-face students. They need to be of equivalence. And so to help us do that, we're also seeing the emergence of new credentialing facilities, so micro-credentialing particularly, and I will talk a little bit about that further in. In terms of the technology-enhanced learning space, we're now also seeing that we're talking about technology mashups. The use of our virtual learning environment, no longer an LMS, but a VLE, the virtual learning environment, of which a learning management system is part of that ecosystem. And so based on that, we do see new models of practice emerging, particularly in the use of mediated artificial intelligence and the use of data to drive our insights into how we are teaching and responding to the needs of our students. But let's just first look at what the VLE context is in terms of Griffith University. So we already use Blackboard 9.1. So this is a vision, this is where we're moving to very rapidly. We do see our virtual learning environment based around the backbone of Blackboard Ultra. We see around that and encompassing that the use of Office 365 and the tools associated with Office 365. Of course, there needs to be the interoperability of those tools with Office and Blackboard, where we're using tools like the Echo 360 ALP environment, Turnitin, Stream and OneNote, PebblePad, VoiceThread, a number of tools that augment this virtual learning environment. On top of that, we see the use of OneDrive, and particularly over the last year, we've seen the emergence of Teams as being a real driver in the terms of interactivity and coordinating the student activities within this ecosystem. And of course, we have other tools out there, the H5Ps and the LinkedIn Learning and LinkedIn Professional, YouTube, the way we stream content, etc. Underlying that, of course, is this notion of our other core systems, our PeopleSoft Student One systems, those systems that are required by an institution to mediate the program and the design of that program. Underlying all those systems, though, is data. And the way we consume that data and the way we make sense of that data is critical to the way we move forward in partnership with our institutions. So our partners need to be open to the fact that we need their data to understand our students. How do we see this emerging, though, over the next few years? Well, we know that we use Blackboard, and we have an associated range of tools over Blackboard, and we have 3 to 4 year undergraduate degrees. But we see the early years of that study being heavily scaffolded with the use of Blackboard and other tools. And so we know that a number of our students within Queensland, where I come from, the public school system uses Blackboard as their learning management system. We see that, of course, the learning management system goes through to postgraduate work. But we also don't see many institutions using Blackboard in the workplace at this point. It may come in the future. We also know that all our public schools and most of our private schools also use Office 365 and the suite of tools that come with Office 365. Now, if you're a Google-based institution, you could replace the word Office 365 with Google. It would be the same. And so in the Australasian sector particularly, we see that as we move through our higher education experience, they will be engaging with Office back in the workplace, not with the learning management system. So it's incumbent upon our university that we're preparing our students for the workplace. And to prepare the students for the workplace, we need to be working with them in terms of the tools they'll be using in the workplace. And so we see that most of the companies within Australia, if not all, I won't say all yet, but the vast majority of companies in Australia are using tools like Office 365, and particularly the use of Teams to mediate their corporate activities. And of course, there are other workplace technologies like CAD and things like that that need to be had for those engineers and other students. So I think that's where we are definitely seeing, that's what we're planning on, and started the journey of working towards this type of partnership across the systems. An example of how we are partnering with Blackboard. So currently we're working with Blackboard on a greater integration with the Office 365 tools to help us work to that vision. So last Friday we'd met with members of the development team to work through how deep these integrations need to be to make this work for us. We're seeing a lot more advanced functionalities being built into Ultra now. Because we've been 9.1, we've been in Blackboard for over 10 years. We have developed up a lot of content, a lot of rich media content, a lot of pedagogy based on this rich media content that needs to still be delivered through a learning management system. And we need a fit-for-purpose learning management system to be able to continue the use of this materials, the ones that we've developed out of good practice over those years. We've helped Blackboard over the years develop up their course analytics reports and things like that, and we'll continue to work with them over the years as we look to how we might better use things like Pyramid, etc. We're also helping Blackboard, as are other institutions, develop up new assessment rubrics and how we will use rubrics, as we do use rubrics, in our assessment activities. And there are many smaller elements, such as the peer review elements, that we're helping Blackboard strategically work through. So we are seeing ourselves as not being able to do this ourselves. We need a vendor to help us do these things, and it's the partnership with these vendors, and I've particularly called out Blackboard here. I wonder why that would be. Anyway, we're here at a Blackboard conference, so I'm calling out the Blackboard example here. But in doing that, those shiny lights, those shiny technologies, we can't be tempted to put the technology cart before the pedagogy horse. And so we must switch this around. So the pedagogy has to be the focus of what we're doing. So pedagogy before technology. I don't know how many, I could keep saying that all day. Pedagogy before technology. So we've developed out of necessity far more eclectic approaches to the way we use technology. And a little bit later in the presentation, you'll see a list of the types of things we can do with technology. The temptation is that those shiny lights of the technology will drive our practice. But we must come with a considered practice to the use of those technologies and choose the technologies that will suit our practice. So some of that practice, and to help frame that discussion, is how we look at things like active, collaborative, authentic learning. So active learning is where you engage students on the analytical level. So we need tools to help us engage them on the analytical level. It seeks to facilitate students to assimilate materials and information rather than passively absorbing them through traditional lectures. And this might look like creating and sharing things like images, PowerPoint presentations, videos, audio files, PDFs, whatever that might be. But the ability to share and create scenarios around those particular elements. It's co-facilitating meaningful discussions through discussion boards, use of teams and things like that, thereby co-constructing knowledge. It's about providing opportunities for students to self-reflect and to reflect on the work of others, hence the peer review tools, the journal tools and things like that that allow us to share practice and reflect on the learning of others to help our own learning. It's about being able to empower and conduct group discussion together through engaging with other tools and those outside the institution within industry. Let's think about authentic learning, what that might look like. Authentic learning is best done by gaining experience at things, by doing things and gaining experience in a safe place. So if you fail, it doesn't matter. It's about failing forward. And so it's about learning by doing rather than learning by listening and observing. For example, this might look like situations where you're dealing with real-life situations and coming up with possible solutions and sharing those possible solutions and outcomes across that. It's giving them an ill-defined problem that then they can easily, or not easily, they can work together to solve. It's about tasks that allow them to do a sustained investigation. So not just a quick answer, but to get into finding the answer, looking into the literature, looking into the research that's happened to find a sustainable solution. It allows for multiple sources and perspectives. It allows for reflection. It allows for perspectives from various disciplines. So this is an engineering, but what would an accountant do in that situation? So it's being able to share across disciplines as well. It's about assessment that is integrated with the curriculum that you're doing, not just sitting out by itself. And it's also about the creation of products. So that 3D printed dress is a product that was created as a solution to a problem. We then look at collaborative learning. Of course, we have tools like Collaborate and things like that within the Blackboard suite. But this generally relies on engaging group structures and being able to gather with other students and have them as part of the community of practice of learning. So such as the peer modelling and getting students to role play. It's about the physical and online scavenger hunt, doing something that they have to go and find and bring back into the environment. It's about creating informal databases on given topics. So it's a collation of knowledge and collation of where a group would collate the resources that they need together will draw on to do their assessments. And it's about formalising and forming groups creatively. This is some examples. I'll revert now back to the innovative research universities, which I'm a part of. So it's a coalition of 7 universities. So this is another partnership we have. And so it's those committed to excellence in learning and teaching and research, these 7 universities. This is my university here, up in sunny Queensland. And we are what we would call is an outward-looking group of 7 institutions. So we work together to solve issues across our 7 institutions, but also to move our 7 institutions forward in a consistent way. So we're not all based in the same city. You notice we're based in different states of Australia. It's difficult to partner with institutions in the same city because you are, in a sense, competing as well. And so we have quite a practice in terms of engaging with Asian countries. So 2 of the reports that were recently delivered was the Australian Innovative Universities in Asia report. So we worked with Asian institutions and the institutions within our network to provide this report, and also Asia Research in Innovative Network. So working with other which universities would see themselves as innovative universities and moving forward together to solve not just problems in Australasia, that is Australia, New Zealand, the South Pacific, but the greater Asian region as well. As we are geographically close together and do see ourselves as part of that greater Asia region. And so we also partner with government parties, so councils, state governments, huge range of things. Overarching all this, though, is this notion that there is quality involved for our students. It's not quality for our own sake. It's quality for the fact that our students will experience something in a consistent way. So we know our students from all the surveys we do, and we do lots of surveys of our students. We know that students are seeking consistency in the way they come to their courses and units. So in the past, our degrees are made up of 24 units of study, 24 courses. And students need to be able to go to those 24 courses. They might be doing 4 in a semester or trimester. And they need to be able to go into each of those 4 courses and know where to find their assessment. They need to know where the lecture recordings are housed. They need to know that there's a process by which the university is deeming to be appropriate to their studies. And so if you've got 4 different course shells and 4 different ways of doing things, students have to go into each of those 4 shells and relearn, which is a cognitive overload that is not necessary for our students. So there's a notion of consistency and quality that needs to be embraced by universities to help our students scaffold their learning. And so that is a consistency across both our face-to-face courses and our online courses. This means that our institutions need to have an agreed framework in place to help them do this. And over the years, many institutions are turning to more online environments, this is becoming increasingly important. So one of the things I proposed a number of years ago, was that there's a hierarchy of needs within higher education institutions, and that there is these needs at a meta level, a meso level, and also a micro level. And that means that these are measures, so there are institution policies and procedures on this left-hand side, that we have policies and procedures in place in relation to technology-enhanced learning, that there is a framework that says, okay, we've got the policies and procedures, this is how it will look in practice. And then there are standards associated with our fully online courses, our fully technology-enhanced learning courses, and that there are some baseline standards that provide a consistency across all our courses, whether they be in a face-to-face environment or an online environment. And so we do see that there are different levels globally in terms of this. So it really depends on your educational jurisdiction, what national infrastructure you might have, the geographical constraints that India face, for example, as opposed to Australia. Huge differences. And so there are also different levels of staff training, those who are really well trained, those who are sessional staff and are moving up the ranks in terms of teaching. So we do see that there are three levels here. We see that there is a technology-enabled learning. That is, using technology just to enable learning, just to be able to give people access to some online materials. There is then this notion of technology enhanced. So we've got the enabled right, we're now enhancing and moving up to the next version of what we're doing in the online space. And then there is technology-intensive learning. That is, learning that is very much drawing on the artificial intelligence and data to drive informed decisions, particularly for those students in an online environment where they're not getting the support of face-to-face instruction. So there are a number of tools across the sector that will help us understand these different levels. So I recently developed for the Commonwealth of Learning this tool here, which is the benchmark toolkit for technology-enabled learning. At that next level up, I helped work with the ACODE group to develop the benchmarks for technology-enhanced learning. And we're currently working on a benchmarking tool for technology-intensive learning, how we're using data and things like that. So that's an emerging tool as we speak. And so we use these tools, and there are a number of others you see there in that box. We're replete with these types of tools to help us put some scaffold around what we're doing in the online space. In my case, because I represent ACODE, I'm going to promote the ACODE benchmarks. I also developed the COL benchmarks. I'm going to promote them as well. But also, we have a great affinity with what's known as the e-learning maturity model, which helps us plot change over time. There's also the OLC quality scorecard, which a number of institutions use, the European e-excellence model. On the benchmarking model, the ACODE one, though, we run, as from 2014, we run biannual activities where institutions will use the benchmarks and then come together to benchmark their practice against some standards that they've self-assessed against. So 2014, we ran at Macquarie University. 24 institutions from 5 countries were there. In 2016, we had 27 institutions from 5 countries, again, come together. These are only the representatives that came to represent the university at that activity, but hundreds of people were involved in the benchmarking of these elements back in their home institutions. In 2017, we went to the UK. We had 17 institutions involved with the benchmarking activity over there. And last year at Griffith University again, we had 24 Australasian universities. So because we'd run the one in the UK, then we just focused back in on Australia and had 24 Australasian institutions involved. That's at the institutional level. Those benchmarks talk about technology-enhanced learning at the institutional level. Then there is, of course, what happens at that micro level, at the course level. A place where many other people don't get to see into. The course is something that the lecturer and the students get to, but the administrators don't necessarily get down into that level. So how do we mediate quality in that area? Well, we do that through things like the quality scorecard the quality scorecard, quality matters, tools like that, the ACODE threshold standards, e-learning guidelines, the JISC online learning standards, European set of e-excellence. We're replete with tools that will allow us, and Blackboard have tools as well to do this. We're replete with tools that will help us understand what quality means at that individual course unit level, subject level. And of course, in Australia, we have now the Ascolite TLC framework, which is a new one that's just emerging. Commonwealth of Learning have a set as well. Here's where we're going, though, in terms of standards, and I'm calling on the James Cook University example here. James Cook is another partner university with Blackboard, and this inspired me for our Griffith standards, and I'll go back to the genesis of my thinking here. We have these standards, base level standards. They also have advanced standards. They have base level standards in relation to student orientation, learning design, media content, and things like that. Every course that James Cook University run have to adhere to these standards. The difference in these standards, as opposed to standards of the past, was we used to say to lecturers and teachers, you must put up a welcome message. You must put your assessment in one place. However, we see here the twist. You see that underline there? Students will. Students will. Students will. Students will. Students will. Students will. Students can. The focus is on the student and what they will experience, not we as teachers will do to them. It's what they will experience through the online environments we have for them and providing for them. To help us then move on to, I talked about formal benchmarking, but there are also activities that we're seeing emerging in the sector that are semi-formal benchmarking activities. And we as an institution run a number of those, as do other institutions. And so we ran last year in January, February, an AR plus VR plus MR plus XR equals a new reality. The way in which we're using augmented virtual extended reality in our learning and teaching. We also ran an activity on the 11th and 12th of June around the use of Microsoft Office and Teams in the learning and teaching and how we're integrating that with our learning management systems. An example of that is, so we had 25 institutions come from across Australasia to benchmark, semi-formally benchmark, not against standards or anything, but just to talk through what we're doing in relation to this. How can we help each other in relation to this? And so we had these 25 institutions come and just share their knowledge. We're all got to do it, and we need to partner to be able to do this better. There's no rocket science in this in a sense, but it's only as we come together that we can start to share our practice and understand how together we can move forward in this space. And so we will be running another one of these in late January next year. So look out for a new Reality 2020 at Griffith University. Similarly, in the Microsoft Teams environment, we had 80 attendees from 16 universities from Australasia. And the question was asked of them, so this is universities in Australia and New Zealand and South Pacific. We asked them who had used Office 365 Teams in the last week, just in the last week. And this was the response. I think 90% of people in the room had used Office Teams within their workplace and within their teaching in the last week. This kind of thought, oh, that's reasonably important. We need to be moving and together need to be strategizing how we're going to pull that thing together with our learning management system and the other tools that we have. The use of technology across the sector was the subject of a 2017 report written by the Centre for Studies in Higher Education coming out of Melbourne University. Melbourne University has got quite a reputation in terms of the support for professional development of academic staff. It involved 117 in-depth interviews with higher education leaders across Australasia. Vice-chancellors, deputy vice-chancellors, etc. This is what they said about the use of technology. They all agreed that the major change is coming. As one leader remarked, I'm not at all confident that the university or anything like its current form will be here in 20 years' time. Why is that? In its current form, it's because of the use of technology. Leaders commented on the dynamic impact technology would have on higher education. One of the GO8, which is the the research-intensive university, so not a strong teaching university, a research-intensive university, though they do teaching, of course. The digital realm penetrates everything. How people access information, how people see the many different ways they can interact with one another, how they receive services, how they how themselves interact with those services. Another Vice-Chancellor said, or President, if you have that terminology, Vice-President, President, Vice-Chancellor, same thing. Technology is going to change the nature of both our interactions with students and the nature of higher education system itself. So what does that mean? What can we do with technology to help us? What we can do really well is things like interactivity. So the personal and programmed interactivity. We can do collaboration one-to-one or one-to-many. We can do we can provide up-to-date and real-time information, not give them a 4-year-old textbook. We can do social learning. There's many social learning opportunities. There's virtual augmented mixed reality, as I've mentioned. There's simulation, allowing students to trial and error situations before they go out into the workplace. There's mobility and flexibility. So in Brisbane, for example, we know the average commuter time is half an hour on a bus. Well, that's the average time somebody will spend on a bus to get to wherever they're going. It's half an hour. Perfect time to do a 15, 20-minute podcast or vodcast. Allow them to listen to that on the bus as opposed to them listening to whatever they might want to. Give them the tools to be able to access that information in the times where they can just access it easily. We use artificial intelligence, machine learning, peer learning, assessment opportunities through those particular elements of technology-enhanced learning. So much we have to offer to our students now. And in particular, as we put those quality processes across and partner with those institutions to help us do that, synchronous or asynchronously. The EDUCAUSE report, which is now the Horizon report, which was taken over by EDUCAUSE, said that there are 3 levels of problems. There's solvable problems, and the solvable problems are improving digital fluency, and that's a major focus of where we are at this point in how we create that digital fluency. It's not about digital literacy, it's about being fluent in that, both for students and staff. There's increasing demand for digital learning experience and instructional design expertise. Really important now at institutions who are moving into this space, that instructional design expertise, being able to train up those designers. More difficult is the evolving role of the faculty. What does this mean for the teacher who has only ever taught in a face-to-face environment, learnt in a face-to-face environment, taught in a face-to-face environment, but is now being asked to make this paradigm shift in their own teaching? It means those instructional designers need to come alongside and work with those people and mentor them up into those particular strategies. And there's also bridging the achievement gap in that for our lecturers and students in many cases. There are some wicked problems though that need a bit more solving. There's how we talk about advanced digital equity. So how we can deal with students in our offshore campuses in a similar way to how we deal with our students in the onshore environment. And also thinking about the whole practice of learning and teaching in this new paradigm. So I was recently at the Commonwealth of Learning, a conference in Edinburgh. That was about 4 weeks ago. And this is the head of Future Learn. Future Learn is part of the Open University. Apologies for the typo in that tweet, but they're a major MOOC provider. And they are faced with this challenge. How are they going to do MOOCs in the future? We know that MOOC model is great for passing on information, but not great necessarily for full engagement at the end of the day. So such a small engagement there. But they do see that this is still part of the great infrastructure of learning and teaching. And his point was that there are 13.9 million new students per year entering higher education, which does require 700 new if in traditional thinking, that would require 700 new universities every year to be developed. 700 universities a year to be developed. That's an astonishing figure. 13.9 million students entering it, on top of the numbers we have already, increasing by 13.9 million every year. Mostly in the India-Asia region and Africa particularly. So, over the years, because many of our institutions have been traditional face-to-face institutions, this is where this fellow comes from FutureLearn, universities who haven't been expert in this online teaching have partnered with other companies to help them make the transition to online learning. So FutureLearn is one of those. The Open Universities Australia, which Griffith University is part of, are one of those. Online education services, KeyPath, Coursera, of course, do it, mostly in the States and in the UK, and also edX is another one of these companies who will partner with institutions, take a significant amount of the profits away from you and put it in their pockets, but they will give you the expertise they need to develop online learning and to come up to speed with this. Doesn't mean you have to stay with them long term. It means that you get the benefit of their wisdom, and sure, you might partner with them for 5, 10 years, but then be in a position, well, hang on, we can do this ourselves now. And also Navitas is another company that does this. This is a gentleman called Lord Putnam. Lord Putnam is in the House of Commons, the House of Lords. He was very involved with the Open University. He said that many of the innovative things that we want to do or get done in the future will require us to force the agenda, as others will not necessarily catch our vision. This is part and parcel innovation that is worthwhile. So although we live in traditional institutions, those things that we hold dear, the visions we hold dear, might mean we don't just accept the fact that we're doing things in a certain way. We need to agitate and put forward new ideas and be very strong in the way we think those ideas will help, even to the point of research and scholarship around those ideas. Here was an innovative model at the Victoria University in Melbourne, right down the bottom of Australia, mainland Australia. They introduced a thing called the Victoria Uni block model. Now, the block model has had a significant impact. It was a disruptor. It has been a disruptor in Australia over the last couple of years. So this block model is based, the traditional model of education is based on, oh, there's a typo there, student experience, and it's lockstepped within the 4 subjects they do at one time. There's a workload with students associated with doing 4 courses at a time, 4 units of study at a time. So students have to negotiate 4 different subjects, along with working for 25 hours a week, and they do this over a period of 16 weeks. Now, working 25 hours a week and studying and doing 4 different subjects, they found the students were getting quite confused. What they proposed was an innovative disruptor, the focus being on immersive and deep learning, that consolidated many of the timetabling issues and assessment activities and complementary activities, and instead of doing 4 courses together, they said, no, we're going to do 4 intensive courses end on end. Still over that 16-week period, but the students are focusing heavily on that course 3 days a week. They're coming to lectures, tutorials and things like that for that one subject. And the students are finding it's so much easier to focus on the one subject as opposed to having to focus on the 4 subjects at a time. They started rolling out this model across their first year and are now rolling it out across their whole program of study at the university. And of course, underlying that, there are development and complementary activities being run at a discipline level that actually pull a lot of those disparate threads together. A fascinating disruptive model that many universities are thinking, wow, they needed to do that. They did need to do it because they were going down the gurgler very quickly. So they needed to actually do something really innovative, and they took the chance to do it. So Mark Prensky, who many of you might know, who developed the notion of the digital native and the digital immigrant. He was also at this conference I went to. And so he reckons that we don't prepare our students for tomorrow. We prepare them for the day after that. So there's no point us looking at what our students will do when they straight get out of university. What are they going to do 5 years down the track from getting out of university as well? So it's being able to look forward and start to train them in terms of the future thinking that is required within this. And this means that we need to partner with industry. We need to partner with major companies to work with them to, okay, this is what you're doing now, and we can help you prepare graduates for when they come out of university, but how are we going to help you prepare our students for 5 years down their track? Where are you going that we can work with you to help our students get there? One of the ways we're seeing in Australia, at least, Australasia, is this notion of micro-credentials, and the way we can package up multi-year chunks within our educational system. So typically it's done on 30-hour blocks of information, short, low-cost courses. For higher education, though, it's an opportunity to provide services to students that will build their professional portfolios, to make them more employable at the other end. It doesn't replace their normal courses, it supplements in many cases, gives them the extra skills that fill in the gaps. So, for instance, here's an example of that. So on the left-hand side is how we see our degrees. So our traditional Bachelor of Business will be made up of a core level subjects. We have possibly 6 to 8 subjects that are specialising in a particular form of business. And then we have a suite of elective subjects or a double major or something like that. And we put that in a jar and we see there's a whole lot of empty space around. All of a sudden we start putting in some micro-credentials into that space. And all of a sudden we fill the jar up. We fill the student up with other things they need to be more fulfilled in their career. In many cases, it's a very messy model, though. And the Metro map describes a whole lot of different things in higher education, but in this particular case, it describes the complex landscape that is digital and credentialing. But it does exist around a framework, similar to Technology-Enhanced Learning does, and how a range of different organisations are doing this. The metaphor depicts a journey. So if I was to do the journey of creating and innovating, it would mean that I'm learning how to use digital images, graphic design, animations, VR, AR, and you can go along that track and see the little bits that I need to be doing to fulfil that activity. So we see this in various forms across different institutions. We see it in postgrad courses based on recognition of prior learning. We're seeing that at post-level courses, building up towards short courses or graduate certificates and things like that. We see this in undergraduate, a series of short courses that could be done as a supplement to a course of study or unit. So 4 micro-credentials might equal 1 course of study. And then we're seeing it at the undergraduate non-accredited ward, so building up a portfolio to support learning and teaching. Different models, there's a nano degree, there's the Purdue University has their create your own major type activity through micro-credentials. We see in Deakin University in Australia, ones around micro-credentials around self-management, digital literacies, etc. And we see in Germany, from the University of Applied Science, we see their badges and the different types of activities they have there, information management, leadership skills, intercultural skills and things like that. So it's those extra little skills, and it's mostly skill-based, that allow institutions to offer their students a little bit more in terms of their employability at the end of the day. Here's what Sussex Downs does. Here's what Griffith University does, my institution. So we have badges associated with achievement, the articulated award, the continuing professional development, being members of societies, the mission, open credentials, skills, work integrated learning, etc. One of the better models I've seen in Australia is what RMIT, Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, the University of Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology offers. They partner with, this is a partnership with a football team. So Australian rules football, it could be a soccer team, could be a rugby team, could be a hockey team, but they partner with the football team and provide the members of the team the opportunity to study micro-credential units while they're doing the training for their team. They're professional teams, and so they're teaching them in professional ways and giving them micro-credentials to work so that once they come out of football career, they've got some qualifications and can go on to do further study. And this, a lot of those around entrepreneurial skills that they might need as they're professional athletes coming out of the other end of being a professional athlete. In the last 2 years, they've signed 100+ of these contracts with different professional bodies to offer these. It's an astonishing model, an astonishing growth model within Australia, targeting a particular way of doing things. That's disruption. But I'm going to leave the last word to the Vice-Chancellor of Monash University, Professor Margaret Garner. She says, the digital disruption and harnessing its possibilities is vital to providing much better teaching and learning in universities in this time of globalisation and massification. For here is the promise of better education for our students. Importantly, so I expect that higher education, and indeed universities, will be the source of their own disruption. We have the wherewithal. We've got some pretty smart people in our institutions. As we harness them and empower them to provide this way forward, that we can be the answer to our own disruptions. Thank you.
Very comprehensive, very deep, but very, very well done.
I can talk loudly. Michael, thank you so much for that. Always a pleasure to hear you speak, genuinely. I want to put you on the spot and ask you about partnerships. I would really love to hear your insights from a university point of view about how we approach developing these very critical partnerships with these huge digital juggernauts and with these small, cool vendors.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about what does an effective partnership look like for you?
Yeah. So obviously we've got quite, there's a huge institutions and the small providers. Generally, it requires someone who specialises in making those connections. So we have a partnership group who look at the different partnerships, particularly across our work integrated learning, but then into other forms of partnership. So it certainly needs people, a unit, or it might be 2 or 3 people within an institution whose job it is to focus in on that partnership model and working very closely with the disciplines to find out what those disciplines require, but also what industry requires. So it's a special type of person that has those roles, and fortunately some of our universities have got those people. But it is a specific skill set that I couldn't go to a company and say, how about you partner with Griffith? Well, what are you going to offer us? Well, we're good at technology-enhanced learning. No, we need to be far more strategic in that. And most of our partnerships are based on the strategic plan and where we want to get our institution to be. And increasingly, it's offshore and how we partner with people offshore to provide professional learning opportunities and to co-create new disciplines or the disciplines of the future. That disruptive model again. Giving whether it be the small entrepreneur or the big company, the opportunity to be disruptive with us. Providing them, say, okay, we have the expertise in education, you have the expertise in the discipline, how are we going to merge those? Instead of them having to actually create their own activities, which might, in many cases, be quite second-rate and very much based on a model of just provision of content.
Any other questions?
Over there.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for the excellent and informative presentation. So you highlighted during your presentation about the pedagogy, and that should be leading the forefront.
Yeah.
And in your view, what will be the developments you see in future about the pedagogy, especially when we are moving towards this more advanced technologies?
Yeah. So this is where I see the partnerships with the vendors becoming really important. It's how we together can unpack what this technology can do for an institution. So if we take the example of the collaborative learning or authentic learning, or I've forgotten the other one now, there are a suite of tools that the vendors know that they can fulfill. And it's as we pull that suite of tools together, they can work with us and we can work with them in terms of providing the right types of opportunities. They may not have developed the tool yet. We have a need, they haven't developed it yet. That's where the partnership can really blossom to help us together work through. So Griffith University have really seen the need to invest a lot in peer assessment. So getting students to assess each other's work. Now the reason we do that is because the student can interact with the materials themselves and come up with their perspective. Student A does that, student B does that. They don't know what the other ones are thinking. Once they can assess each other's work, they get opened up to other ideas from the same content that they learned. And so by doing that, they're learning from each other and, of course, learning from the lecturer. And so we need the tools to be able to do that within our ecosystem. And we need advanced tools to do that. So we come to vendors, we look for other opportunities to be able to provide those tools. So the pedagogical need drives the innovation towards that tool. And as we learn more about how we do that, then there'll be other things that will enhance that tool even more, new ways of doing peer learning and peer assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. From this gentleman here?
So appreciated the talk, Michael. It was great. So building off of that last question and pedagogy first, so you just talked about peer assessment and peer feedback, which seems to be cross-cutting across subjects and disciplines. Do you have examples of discipline-specific pedagogies that are important, do you think, in terms of particular subjects or courses where there's something that's going to be really important in terms of kind of building that and again, this partnership between educational institutions and vendors? Are there examples that you can think of?
So I think probably the clearest example we see in the sector at the moment is the AACSB accreditation that was required by many business schools. So the American Association of Schools of Business have a suite of standards that universities need to adhere to get that registration, to get that stamp of approval from this association. And so a part of that, part of their standards to be given that stamp is peer learning and peer assessment, and being able to demonstrate the ability to work with peers, not just around assessment, but peer work as well. And so many institutions for a number of years now have been struggling to find the right tools to be able to evidence that practice, because what they require is evidence and a portfolio of work that will evidence that activity. So the peer learning that happens, there's an evidentiary trail that needs to walk with that. And so it might be one thing to do that at an individual course level, but if you close off your course in a year's time and you can't get to it anymore, how does that evidentiary trail follow through? And so there's the extension of peer learning and peer review is the thought that there's an evidence trail that a student is going to want to hold on to for quite some time. Our systems need to be able to accommodate that. At the moment, it's not necessarily that evident how they can do that.
Great,
apart from an e-portfolio or something like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.